The webinar is now live and we are recording.
We are, and the guests are arriving. Hello, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
We can see you all coming in. We'll just wait for a minute until everybody joins. I'm not sure how many people are going to be here in total, but we'll give it a few minutes. Great to see so many people here that come along on Fridays. Lynn, Hilary, Daniel, hello, Malcolm, Nicola. Can't get enough of me. Got me tomorrow morning as well. Hello, Nicola says in the chat. If anyone else wants to say anything, then you can type in the chat or you can type in the Q&A section.
Hello all. Hello, Stephen. Do we not get to see people?
No, they can see us, but we can't see them.
Very voyeuristic, isn't it? Humphrey, give us a prompt for tomorrow. So, okay.
No, that's cheating.
Stephen's doing an evil laugh.
You have to do it on the moment, otherwise it doesn't work properly. And also I'm always very last minute and I keep changing my mind right up until we do it about what story I'm going to read. I've already looked at about 5 for tomorrow.
Hello, Hilary. I think Malcolm said hello as well.
Hello.
Hello all.
So we're up to 15 so far. About 40 had said yes on the thing, but everyone doesn't always turn up. So we'll give it another couple of minutes, I think. And then we'll get started. Hello from cold Switzerland, Moyet says. Hello.
Hello, Moyet.
It's cold in Ireland too today. Really cold wind, but the sun was shining. Whereabouts in Switzerland are you, Moyet? Hello, Sarah. Near Lausanne. Sounds lovely. Hi from Michigan, USA, says Pat. It's cold and today it snowed. Yeah, that sounds like our March. We've been, no, April we're even in now. We've had snow. All last weekend it snowed. I was thinking barbecue weather was coming. Blue skies and golden sunshine in Northumberland. Blooming cold though, Stephen says. I'm glad it's not just cold here. When I first moved to Ireland, I used to religiously look at the weather back at home and upset myself because it was always raining and cold here. And like England became this kind of like shining beacon of sunniness, it seemed.
Really?
I went back there and it's not.
No, it's not, no. Sarah's in Sheffield, where the weather is good. Fine city, Sheffield.
Okay, right. I think we'll probably get started now, and then if anyone else comes along, they can just join in at the point that they get there. So everybody already knows me, Amanda. Hello. And this is my friend and colleague, Craig.
Hello, everyone.
Craig before.
Yeah.
So Craig and I have known each other for many years, and we designed the Novel Creator course together, which we have been teaching together for 3.5 years now. Yeah. So we're halfway through the 3rd course, and we're starting the 4th one in September. And what we're going to speak to you about tonight is a little bit about what we teach on the course, which can help you as you approach your planning and plotting of your novel and figuring out what it's about. And I'm going to talk about character within that, because character is my big thing. And I have a whole module dedicated to it in the course. And I'm going to give you a little snippet of it tonight that will still, even though it's just a little snippet, give you lots of value as you think about writing the characters in your novels. So over to you, Craig.
Okay, hello everyone. So yeah, I'm, as Amanda says, my name's Craig and I write fiction and I also edit fiction and for various publishers. And I also do screenwriting. So I write films and television. And writing films and television has sort of helped me, sort of gave me a model to generate stories, because those practices, film and TV, are very craft based. You know, they're very they're more less concerned with inspiration and more concerned with sort of nuts and bolts. It's very structural. And you know, if you're in that line of work, then you have to be able to generate a story out of anything. So last year, for example, this mad Japanese guy that I know commissioned me to write a movie about the ghost of a medieval samurai in contemporary Madrid, right? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I can do that, because I had to, right? Because that's the job. So because you get these strange commissions, I sort of had to develop this system or a structure or a method to generate stories and to hang them all together. And that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. I've got a few slides. But before I do that, I just wanted to say my approach to storytelling is very structural, and it is to do with method, and it is to do with craft. And what I sort of like about this course that Amanda and I do together is that Amanda's take on it is very different to mine. She's sort of very intuitive, and she concentrates on the character. And we've got completely different approaches, you know, and often contradictory, it would seem, but you know, that's what the truth of storytelling is that, you know, neither of us is wrong or right. You know, I bring a certain set of tools to the job, and Amanda brings her own set of tools to the job. And you know, the people that we're teaching, sometimes the tools I bring work, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes the tools Amanda brings work, and sometimes they don't. So it's just a question of sort of complementary approaches, really. And I'm very structural and predictably very Boise about the whole thing. So I will now show you my organized slides, which are very structural.
I haven't got the slides.
Yeah. So I'll do that. But I've brushed my slides up a bit today and made some cheerful spring colors added. And they're usually a bit more dour, but I've gone for springy slides today. So, oh, and I'm on the wrong slide, rather helpfully. So here we go. So to generate a story, I've got this method which links plot with character and theme. Okay, so this is the sort of process. You look at your inspiration. Why is it that you want to tell this story? And I am going to have to crack through this, by the way. Normally I would spend a lot more time on this. So you're just going to get bombarded a little bit, and I'm going to talk very quickly. But this is supposed to be a sort of taster rather than the whole thing. It's a tasting menu rather than a banquet. So, you know, you look at why you want to write something. What's your inspiration? What's the scratch? What's the thing that's bugging you? You know, what's inspiring you? And you sort of and you're able to, and by looking at that, my slides have gone rogue. You're able to define what the theme is of your story, because you're working with the inspiration. You're like, oh, my story's about that. You're looking at it. And then, so this is the process. So you go from inspiration to theme. I'm going to show how. And then you go from theme to character. So theme, characters embodying different aspects of the theme. And then once you've established those characters, you then go to plot. And this is how I generate stories when I get commissioned to write a film or what have you. I go from the inspiration to theme, from theme to character, from character to plot. Okay, in that way, by going that way, all of the main aspects of your story are going to hang together. Okay, So the three constituent parts of narrative: theme, what a writer says about the world. People talk about in fiction and literature, they talk about points of view, tone, voice, what your story is about. So theme is the thing that, you know, it inspires you. It's what you want to say about the world. It's your take on the world. Now, the characters that you invent, they embody your theme. They embody different aspects of your theme. And then the plot, what happens, right? So these are the three main constituent parts of narrative arts. Okay. Now, this sentence here is about 60% of my job, right? If you can understand this, then you can kind of get it, right? So in narrative art, characters contest theme via plots, right? So characters carry different aspects of the theme, and I'm going to get very concrete very quickly. Characters carry different aspects of the theme, and they sort of, their attitude towards the theme is altered as a result of the events of the plot. So we'll come back to, just try and remember this sentence. In narrative art, characters contest theme via plot. And if you can get that, that's a sort of unifying concept to bring all of the major aspects of narrative art together into one sort of articulated, organic movement. And that way your story will be about something. Your plot will line up with your characters will line up with your theme. Okay. So what you've got to understand is that theme is broad. It needs to be broad. When you're saying what the theme of your story is, it needs to be broad because it needs to be able to carry contradiction and complexity. You can't just have one version of the theme. So say your theme might be unrequited love, right? You can have different aspects of that theme. One character might suffer from unrequited love. One character might be subject to unrequited love. One character might have given up on love entirely. One character might fall in love every 5 minutes. So the theme that you derive from your inspiration needs to be defined in a broad enough way that it can carry different versions of it, contradictory versions of it, which your characters embody, so that when the characters meet and clash thematically, that moves the plot forward. Because drama is conflict, okay? Story is argument, and it's the contradictions in these themes that drive the plot forward, okay? So I'm gonna, here's a very simple example that, of this method, okay? So the film Fatal Attraction, okay, 90s action film, I'm guilty, right? So the film Fatal Attraction, the theme of it is risk. So the guy with the gun, his attitude to risk, the aspect of the theme of risk which he embodies is that he takes too many risks, right? He is essentially suicidal. He'll run into any situation with his gun out. He'll chase the cops down the street, not the cops, the drug dealers down the street. He doesn't really care about his own welfare, right? Whereas the guy with the tie holding up the photo, he's the opposite. He's very meek. He won't take any risks whatsoever, right? And so they have different attitudes and they embody different variations of the theme of risk, okay? And they're opposites. They're co-protagonists in this film. And anyone who's watched this film will probably not be able to remember the plot, but they certainly will be able to remember the characters because they're brilliant. And this film sort of spawned a whole genre of buddy thrillers, right? Wisecracking buddy thrillers. And so by structuring your characters around theme, it gives your flaws and your disharmonies, and it also gives the backstory. Because why is the guy with the gun? So once you've attributed a version of the theme to a person, you then ask the question, why are they like that? So the guy with the gun, he's essentially suicidal. He doesn't care if he lives or dies because his wife's just died. It doesn't matter to him. He has no respect for himself. He doesn't care about life. And that's why he's acting in this way. Whereas the guy with the photo, right, he's got 3 kids and he's about to retire. So he desperately is trying to get out of his dangerous line of work so that he can have his long promised happy retirement with his family. He's a family man, right? So once you've attributed the different aspects of the theme, you start being able to explain why they're like it. So you automatically bring the backstory into play. What has made this person like that? And then of course it starts to define the plot. Because if the plot's about risk, well, if the theme's risk, well, what have you got to do? You've got to put them in a situation that brings out the theme, that brings out risk. So you've got to put them into dangerous situations. So what dangerous situations can you put them in? Where one guy would go one way, one guy will go another way, right? So it starts to conjure up events. And also it provokes what they need to overcome. It gives you the sense of what they need to overcome to become a sort of a harmonious and balanced person. So the guy with the gun, he's got to care for his life and stop being putting himself in harm's way. The guy with the photo, he's got to sort of understand that life has got legitimate risks in it. You can't wrap yourself up in cotton wool, especially if you're a cop, because actually that's dangerous. Not taking risks, is dangerous and detrimental in his line of work, right? So by working out different versions of a theme, by giving it to characters, it gives you the backstory, why they're like this. It gives you their problem, what they overcome, and it starts to give you the plot. Okay. And then there's a little widget that I use. There are plenty of little widgets that I use, which I give away on the course, and I give away all my secrets on the course and all my widgets. But this is one from Story, the book by Alexander McKee, Robert McKee rather. And I'm not a huge fan of his sort of stipulative style, but I find this really useful. So these are 4 possible variations of attitudes to theme. So you can have a positive attitude to the theme. So you have one character who, once you've worked out what your theme is, you have a positive variation on it. You have an ambivalent variation. So they'll kind of be with the theme sometimes against it, kind of wishy-washy. And negative aspect, this is not a very complicated little widget. I'm just trying to give you an entree into ways that you might structure this thinking. And then Robert McKee calls this thing the 4th version in this little widget. He calls it the neg of the neg. And I don't know why he does that, but what it means is that you're self-deluded. It means that you believe you have one attitude towards the theme, but actually you have a different attitude towards the theme. And that character in that corner, in the neg of the neg corner, they're furthest away from the possibility of being a harmonious person, of understanding life in a true and undiluted way, because they're profoundly deluded. So actually starting someone with that variation of the theme is enormously helpful for a writer, because it means that the person's got to go on an extraordinarily long journey of emotional development in order to get to a point of harmony, or indeed to fail to get to that point, and in which case you might be writing a tragedy. But they're very far away from where ideally they would like to be. So just to sort of summarize it, and usually when I do this talk, I give a lot more examples, and it's kind of slowed down. I try to make it more concrete and do it so people can apply it to their own work. But just to kind of sum it up, you go from inspiration, you sincerely ask yourself, what is it I want to write about? What is bugging me? Why am I thinking about doing this course? Why am I thinking about writing this book? Why am I on this Zoom call? What is the thing which is moving me? And people often think they've got to write profoundly and write great literature, but you just have to be absolutely honest with yourself about your own inspiration, because it's enough. It is absolutely sufficient if you can breathe life into it. So be honest. What is your inspiration? What do you, as a person, how do you see the world truthfully? What is your particular point of view? And then once you sort of trust that inspiration, you sort of breathe life into it, you turn it into theme. What's your book about? What are you writing about? Then you roll that over to characters, and you start developing characters who've got different aspects, who are embodying different aspects of this theme. Then you start rolling it over into plot. and plot, as we'll see here, is a different game entirely. This is a diagram from a book called The Transformational Arc by a writer called Dara Marks, and it's absolutely brilliant, and it absolutely changed my entire working practice when I read it. And I wrote her a little fan letter, and she sent me a signed book, and we're mates now, and it's great. So this widget, I stole this off Dara, and this is a map of how someone changes or fails to change across a plot. And so on the course, we sort of, and it looks like startlingly difficult when you look at it, but if I had the time to explain it for 15 minutes, you'd be like, oh yeah, I get that, that's no problem. It's just very helpful. It's a map of how people change across time. And so when you start thinking about how someone would want to transform, would need to transform their unusual attitude towards the theme as to become a sort of harmonious, undiluted person, this map here is a sort of mechanism about how that transformation will take place. And I've just kind of put it up there to kind of freak you out at the end of the talk, really. And but it does make perfect sense. And I shall stop my Boise diagram diatribe now and hand over to the much calmer Amanda. But thank you for listening.
Thank you, Craig. So I first saw Craig teach that at a writing festival about, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago now.
Yeah, probably.
And it really resonated with me, but I'm a pantser. And so it also frightened the life out of me, because I thought there's no way that I can work within that. And I have found a way to work within it that works for me and my style of writing and my approach to writing. Because for me, the longer pieces of work that I've written 2 novels, a novella, and I'm just starting a 4th novella. All of them have come from a character that appears in my head. And they appear more and more frequently and start becoming less nebulous and more concrete, but I still don't really know what they're there for and what it is that they want to do. And then that starts to come to me. And then once this person is sort of formed in my head, I then go to this process that Craig describes here and do my own version of it, which I also share in the course. And it's called the Easy 10-point plot, because if you are frightened of plotting and planning and being too restricted in that, like I am, because I feel that I need to have freedom to write as well as some kind of plan, then that's my version of it. And so, like Craig said, lots of people that come on the course, his version of it works completely for them. And then there's lots of people that come on the course that are like me, and they're like, yeah, I can see that that's really great, but no, I'm going to do the easy 10-point plot. But among all of that, for me, every novel and every novella that I write, and also every flash fiction, is all about character. And so in the course, I have a whole module about character, and there's also a tutorial in the opening module when you start planning your novel. And in the whole module about it, I focused on what I call the 3 C's of character, which means that the narrator in your novel, or narrators, if there is more than one, they need to be complex, they need to be contradictory, and they need to be consistent. So complex is pretty self-explanatory. They need to not be two-dimensional. They need to be like real people, and people have all different sides to them. They need to be contradictory in that everybody is contradictory. Everyone you know, they say something and they do something that completely doesn't align with what they've said. And so that's a part of it too, which also feeds into complexity. And the two work close together in the work that I do on it. And then the consistency is about the transformational arc that the character goes on in the novel. And so they've got a consistent behavior which needs addressing, and they either transform it or they don't by the end. And so it's in what you do with that consistency that provides the emotional resonance for your story. Either, yay, they fixed it, it's a happy ending, or, oh no, they've got even worse, and it's a tragedy. So, but for today, because we have very limited time, because there's the Q&A at the end so that you can question us and we'll do our best to answer it. I would just want to focus on character complexity. So if you've been reading any of the blog posts that I've made, the A to Z of character, you'll see in those blogs what I'm talking about, because I show the different sides of these characters in these novels and how nobody is ever just one thing. Because in the editorial work that I do, hundreds and hundreds of novels pass over my desk every year. And a lot of the problem in newer writers' character development is that their good guy is all good and their bad guy is all bad. And there's no black and white, there's no meeting in the middle. So character complexity comes from knowing that even your hero has got things that need fixing. None of us are perfect, or we would be the Buddha. And at the same way that the bad guy is obviously doing bad things, or bad woman, there's something in their life that's made them like that. And even though you might not necessarily reveal that to the reader, you need to know it. You need to know that there is another side to this person, so that when they appear in your novel, you write them and they seem like real people rather than caricatures of a baddie or a goodie. And so I've been reading mystical readings lately from ancient times, and this is something that I came across in reading the Tao Te Ching in the foreword, and it really made me think that this is what I'm teaching about character, but it's put it in a way that I thought was really great. And it said, evil is not a force to resist, but simply an opaqueness, a state of self-absorption, which is in disharmony with the universal process, so that as with a dirty window, the light can't shine through. So that about the dirty window just made me go, that's what I'm saying about characters. So we're all windows. And so your hero, their window is less dirty, and your bad guy, theirs is filthy. But there's a little chink in the corner where you can still see through. And it's about how you reveal that. And it can be in just one line, just one moment of the novel, that you give us a deeper insight into a baddie. Because I really believe that no matter what genre you're writing, you have to make your characters complex and real. Otherwise, they're just forgettable. I mean, I've read loads of different novels because I have to read across all genres in order to be able to do what I do for a job, because I have to understand what each genre is doing. And I find them so unsatisfying if they haven't put the time into developing the character, and completely forgettable. But I enjoy reading all different genres. I enjoy crime, I enjoy horror, and I enjoy what people call commercial fiction. And I love a nice little commercial fiction rom-com story with a happy ending, but only if the characters have been written well. I don't want them to just be like these ticker tape characters that everyone churns out book after book after book. And so I really believe that writing your characters with the 3 C's is the way that you make them real for your reader and for you. So you've got to enjoy writing them too. So I share a quote in the course, which comes from Stephen King, about how writing has to be something that you do to make your readers feel something. And in order to make your readers feel something, you have to feel it first. And I really think that's true. We all want readers to read our books, but unless we're just doing this for the money, in which case I would say, get out of it now. then it has to come from the heart, and coming from the heart is how you write characters that people never forget. So that's all I've got to say about character this evening. So I hope you've enjoyed our two different approaches, mine with a mystical spiritual text and Craig's with his PowerPoint presentations. So you can start typing your questions into the chat or into the Q&A panel at the bottom.
Are people not able to unmute and ask? Does it not work that way?
No, because it's a webinar rather than a meeting.
Okay.
You have to invite people in to talk.
Okay.
Can they put their hands up? Oh yeah, if you put your hand up if you want, rather than typing, and then I can allow you to talk. If anyone has any questions.
There's one.
Q&A box, we've got one. Lynn, I was curious as to what the lower lines led to on the graphic with the when, why, what, etc. Craig?
I'm guessing that you mean the final slide that I showed. Is that right? Is that the then what is meant by the then, why, what? Do we mean this thing here? Is that what's meant?
I'm not sure. Lynn?
I'd be delighted to answer if it could the person asking that question.
No,
because I don't quite get it. But
the advert for the course. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Lynn.
Maybe it's on the website or something. Nothing to do with this. The advert for the course, no.
I'm not sure. If you stop sharing your screen again, Craig, I'm going to invite Lynn to talk so we can get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn, hello.
Okay. Hello. Hi.
Anyway.
I've really enjoyed what you've just shared, actually, and I could also see how, you know, that structure that you offer, Craig, which is something I still have to get to grips with because I'm not a planner and I really want to be a planner, but I like working intuitively. So I like that idea that I could bring that art into, you know, developing the character. So that's given me something to think about. But there was a graphic when on the original post that you put up about this, Amanda, there was a graphic on there that had little, it was like a bubble with little lines coming off it with the when, why, what, who, where, how. And underneath it, there were 3 lines coming down, but the, if you like, the ad kind of thing was across that, so you couldn't see it, but it was on your original. And I just thought, I was just curious about where those 3 lines led.
Is this on the community event that you mean, Lynn?
Yeah, on the where you advertised it on the community event.
Hold on a minute. Let me open it up and have a look. I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Well, we could take a wild guess what those 3 might be. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's something we can look into afterwards. And
yeah, it's not, you know.
Oh, right, no, that's just a picture. So that's just an image of a light bulb. So those lines are the light bulb going down.
The light bulb bits. I didn't get the light bulb. I just got the words. You see, I'm so word oriented. Right. Sorry, I've just wasted time.
No, that's fine. I'm glad we got.
You had a light bulb moment.
Yeah. So, I didn't, but somebody did. So that's great.
Okay, so Kristen asked, to what extent would you recommend applying the C's of character to characters beyond your main characters, the side characters, even bit characters? Thank you.
So I wouldn't do it for bit characters to any like great degree. Anybody that appears in the novel and has some relevance to how things play out, I would do it to a lesser degree for them, but I mainly do it for the main characters in my cast. So in my novella that I've just finished writing, I've got 2 main characters, 2 sisters, and then surrounding them, I've got 3 lesser characters, and then about 4 or 5 other characters that appear and do various things. So I did the deep in-depth work on the 2 sisters and the 3 main characters around them, and then I just had a little think about the other characters. I hope that's helpful.
Hilary asks, how can you tell if your theme and characters will be strong enough to sustain something the length of a novel? And how can you come up with something that hasn't already been done to death? 2 very straightforward questions there. Well, you can tell if your theme and characters will be strong enough to sustain something the length of a novel by plotting it. You know, what a novel needs is key scenes, it needs reversals of fortune, it needs revelations, it needs events. And so you start to unroll your inspiration, your character across a plot, and to tentpole it and to say, right, what is the end of my act 1? Where's the reversal there? What is my midpoint? Where's the reversal there? What's my crisis? What is the ultimate confrontation between the sort of antagonistic and protagonistic forces? These are all things that we teach on the course. And by answering these questions or not being able to answer these questions, you'll determine the sort of shape of your inspiration. And it might be that you've got a short story on your hands. And there's nothing the matter with that. So you can determine the shape of your inspiration by applying it to a traditional plot structure and seeing how it conforms to it or doesn't conform to it. I mean, it might not conform at all to a traditional plot structure, but be the length of a novel, right? That's possible too. So you work it out. You push it across a plot. And how can you come up with something that hasn't already been done to death? Well, that's the question that we all face, isn't it? And the answer to that is, from my perspective, is to be absolutely honest with your own experience, to tell the truth about your own feelings. And that way, whatever you're writing, you're breathing life into it freshly. You may well be writing a plot which has been written 200 times before, but you're writing it fresh. You're bringing it to life again. Because there's all these rules and theories and tools for creative writing, of course, but ultimately, if you don't have something to say, what's the point? And you have something to say by being honest about your experience. That's the guarantee of having something to say, is by being honest about how you see the world. And that way, you will have enough fuel to get the project to the end, because it's on firm foundations. It's on the truth of your experience. I'll stop.
I would say as well that it's about trusting your story and knowing that even though it's a storyline that's probably been done before, in some shape or form, the way that you will do it will be different. And so no matter what you might think about the fact that you might be writing something that's been written before, it won't ever be anything like anything that's written before, unless you literally go and copy it, because it's always completely different. As an example, when I was writing my first novel, which took forever because I didn't know what I was doing, and I assumed because I'd read loads of novels all my life, that would be it. I'd just sit down and I'd write one, and that would just be like an amazing process, and then I'd have a book. But it wasn't like that, and it was a messy, very long and convoluted process. But when I'd finally started to get it into some kind of shape where I thought that it might be getting nearer to something that actually looked like a proper novel, and the book is, the premise of this that kicks the story off is a woman whose husband goes missing. And I was just, it was about a week before I was going to the Festival of Writing in York to pitch my novel to agents. And Maggie O'Farrell had a new book out that week, and she's one of my favourite writers, so I was really excited about it. Went to look at it online, and it was about a woman whose husband goes missing in the exact same way that my husband went missing in my novel. And I went into a complete tailspin and panic for about half an hour, cried a bit, and thought, well, that's it. I've spent the last like 5 years of my novel, 5 years of my life writing a novel that's never going to get published now because Maggie O'Farrell's just written it. And so I went and bought Maggie O'Farrell's book and read it, and it was completely different to mine. Of course it was. And there's always going to be other novels that have got a similar premise or a similar world or deal with similar themes, but you can only do it in your way, and that's always going to be unique. So I hope that helps. Okay, Daniel, first, I'm glad I signed up for the Novel Creator. Yay, so are we, and can't wait for September. Now my long comment question. I find Craig's advice to build characters around theme very helpful. It's already helping with the story I'm working on, but I've heard conflicting ideas about theme. I think Stephen King in On Writing said to let the theme emerge naturally at the end. Do you find that the theme changes over the writing process or becomes more refined?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to go toe to toe with Stephen King, am I? So there's only going to be one winner there, right? So I think he's, you know, I think the way I see process and the way I see models of storytelling and the way I see this method that I have is it's scaffolding, right? You're just kind of holding the story up. You're holding it up. And it may well be that the story takes a crazy turn at the end, right? And that's fine. You're just mapping it out that way, saying what your theme is, and that you're heading in that direction. It's a map, right? And you may find as you're going along that there's a whacking great hill in the way, and you've got to kind of go a different way. So to me, everything I've said about going from inspiration to theme to character to plot, it's how you get started. It's how you develop your intentions. And then when you start to apply your intentions to the reality of the text and the story, you must be alive to the spontaneity of the situation that you're in. The more formula you apply, the more formulaic your story is, right? And you have to be alive to the unexpected, the beautiful chance that emerges in the process. So I don't invoke process in order to be stipulative. I invoke process in order to try and start nearer to the target. That's all it is how can you start closer to where you want to go so that you don't waste time marching off 180 degrees in the wrong direction, right? And of course, you need to be responsive. And yeah, you may find that your understanding of what your theme is at the end is very different to what you thought it was at the beginning, right? You may find that. And the process that I've outlined comes from screenwriting, and screenwriting, you know, a movie is a 2-hour thing, right? You kind of, it's very start to finish. It's sort of like it's a cup of coffee, isn't it? Whereas a novel is a sort of pot of tea, and you kind of sit about more and mull it over, and you go down little highways and byways, and it's more of a sort of broad heterogeneous thing. Whereas a movie's very A to B, so it's quite stipulative about themes. So yeah, I think he's right, and I think you'll be surprised at the end that it's different to what you thought. But that doesn't mean that there's no point in drawing a map, which will be falsified by the journey. I think the map is massively important.
Yeah, I would agree. And I just had the same experience in my novella. I set out writing it, and my theme that I wanted to explore through these two sisters was nature and nurture. And what is it that guides us? Because these two sisters have the exact same genetic makeup, come from the same family, were brought up in the exact same way. They're only 11 months apart and couldn't be more different. And so that's the theme that I wanted to explore. And I have done that to a degree in that novella, but actually the whole thing turned out to be about the unreliability of memory. So, but the work I did at the beginning around my theme and what I wanted to explore through these sisters definitely guided the writing of the first draft of that. And it wasn't until I've just got to the end of the third edit, it's just come back from my editor, so I've got one more to go, maybe two, and it's definitely the theme is now the unreliability of memory and nature and nurture and all kinds of other things that emerge when you're writing, because you might start out with one theme, but every single novel has multiple themes woven through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be available to be hijacked as a writer by the work.
Yeah.
But ideally just not at the beginning, because otherwise you'll just disappear off in the wrong direction. So I hope that's helped, Daniel.
He says, yes, thank you. I want to go right now. Well, don't let us stop you. Go right.
So Sarah asks, what if you're struggling to identify the theme from your inspiration, whether that's a character or something less concrete? Any more tips for figuring it out? Sure. Well, I would forget about the sort of any stringent attempt to go from inspiration to theme. I mean, that just not burden yourself with that. These things, are supposed to be helpful, and if they're not helping you, then just don't use them. You don't. So many writers, especially sort of at the beginning of their practice, incriminate themselves because they can't. The things that they're taught are not working for them, and that just means that it's the wrong thing, right? You want a chisel, and someone's giving you a hammer, right? So I specialize in hammers. Amanda specializes in chisels. Take your pick, right? No one's better than the other. So I would just say, don't incriminate yourself, Sarah, and don't think I should be able to do this. Absolutely, do not do that. Just relax, trust, and try and dig deeper into the truth of your inspiration, and then just start to sort of. Don't have performance anxiety about, is it mapping on, is it growing, is it this? Just see what it is. And you might find, if you're just truthful and honest about it, that it's the wrong story. Or you might find it's exactly the right story, but it just needed to breathe. Or you might find it's a short story, right? Just kind of let it be what it is, and don't force it into a system. I force things into a system because I'm in a hurry and I'm a hack, but that doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah, and I don't. And when I wrote my second novel, which started with a character who came into my head who was living in the future and being persecuted for witchcraft, and that's all I knew about her for years, because I was still writing my first novel at this time, that really long one that took forever. And by the time I got around to writing her, I figured out why she'd ended up living in this future where it was more like the past and she was being persecuted for witchcraft again. And I wrote what's called a climate fiction novel, because I am well, I used to be a journalist as well. I don't do it anymore now, because I just run Retreat West. But for nearly 20 years, I was a journalist writing about environmental sustainability, and I was angry about what was happening to our planet and that people weren't taking enough notice. And I was going to pour all my anger into this woman who ended up living in a world that we'd ruined, where people had gone mad and were doing witch hunts again. And I poured all of my anger about the climate change and the use of the world's resources into this character in this scenario, not knowing at all what my theme was that I was exploring other than that. But when I got to the end of the second draft, which is when I sent it out and let other people see it for the first time, while they were reviewing it, I sat down and really thought about, okay, I've done all that now. I've told everyone off about what they're doing to the planet through this character. So now I need to find what's the real emotional truth of my story, which is what your theme is really. And I realized that it was the power of love to change things. And so my main character had been going out and protesting and getting involved with activists and doing violent things, trying to make everyone see things her way. And her husband was like, well, no, that's not the way to do things. You don't even need to do that. We've got our own community here where we're safe, etc. Because this is before she was persecuted for witchcraft. So he was wrong, but he was right. And he believed that love, if you just did everything out of love and acted with love, everything would be all right. And so that's the theme that I finally identified for that novel. And I started to weave that in and change things in my third edit of that novel to focus on that theme. So if you don't know about it until third draft or fourth draft, that's fine.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've been eyeing this question from Gail with great trepidation here, but I can't dodge it any longer. So I'd love to hear Craig's process applied to his medieval Japanese samurai story, and on this same character and how she might approach, if there's time.
I really don't think there is.
I don't know if there is, because I only told you half the story, right? This Japanese guy who commissioned me, he's a proper loony, right? And he's extraordinarily rich. He's worth hundreds of millions of pounds, right? And he just occasionally commissions berserk film scripts off people, right? So half of it was the medieval Japanese samurai in contemporary Madrid. And the other half of it that he asked me to do was that the samurai had been summoned to contemporary Madrid because a girl had just been involved in a car crash there, and she died, and she was going to become an angel, and it was his job, the Japanese samurai's job, to gently lead her to understanding that she died and she was an angel.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what he asked me to do. So, you know, I had to write a buddy movie between a woman who didn't know she was dead and Japanese samurai. It was excellent, actually, and I really enjoyed it. And the guy loved the script, and we were going to film in October. It was all set up to film, and then COVID nixed it, so I was very annoyed about it. But another thing that made it even more complicated was that I wrote it with someone else, and I wrote the first and the third quarters, and my co-writer wrote the second and the fourth quarters.
Right.
Because that played to our different strengths, the different parts of the film. So, given that, how did we apply theme? Well, we did. We worked out. We would. There were these characters in this situation, and they had different challenges. One had to realize that they were dead, and the other one had to bring them to that realization. And so we played with the predicaments and the feelings associated with these predicaments, and that led on to the theme. It was a crazy brief, and I hope for many more like that. And my answer was probably about as insane as the brief was.
And how would I apply my character approach to this Japanese samurai?
You could have dodged that if you wanted.
Yeah, in the same way that I apply it to every character. I would sit down and think about it. But in the way that Craig gets commissioned to write stories like that, where he's given a character, I've never written a long form piece of fiction like that. So I've never had to apply my approach to characters that haven't come to me organically. So whether it would work, I don't know. And I can't imagine that I'll ever find out. Because if someone came to me and asked me to write that movie, I'd run the other way.
Well, I tried, but he was waving all this money at me. So.
Yeah. Although I would like to watch it when it's ready.
Yeah, well, I hope it gets filmed. It'd be quite fun.
Yeah.
So Lynn asks, you mentioned being hijacked. I find this happens with characters turning up like uninvited guests. How do you manage that? Shut the door on them or follow where they take you? Would a plan stop that happening so much? Well, it might and it might not. The thing about having a plan is that you know when you've departed from it, right? You don't have a plan to stick to it. You have a plan so that you know when you're going off it, and you can ask yourself, do I want to go off it? I'm veering madly away from the thing that I intended. Is that the right thing for the story? Am I just going berserk here, or have I found some new interesting energy, and do I adjust my plan? So by having a quantified intention, you can gauge where you're going and ask yourself if you want to modify your intention. So it might stop it happening, it might not. It's a very intuitive juggling act between spontaneity and planning. It really is, and everyone's different, and every project's different. And I am more structured when I'm writing film and less structured when I'm writing fiction. But the structures that I use for film help me in fiction.
And because I'm more character-led, I would say that if there are characters that are turning up and are very strongly taking part in the story when you hadn't planned them to, I'm of the belief that they're there to tell you something that they need to about that story, and that you should go with them and see what they reveal. And it might not necessarily end up being in the book when you get to the end version, but it will teach you loads about the book and the characters in it. So if someone's coming to you really strongly, then I would say follow them and see what they want to tell you.
Yes, and it might be that they are coming, that they form another story. Like I had an experience once where I was writing a book that came out in 2018 called Staying On, and there's a story about this old guy, and his daughter-in-law just kept hijacking the book, right? And to the point where I just had to give her own narrative. So I was like, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go with this and write her out. And I don't know if it will be in the book or not, but the impulse is there. And so I just wrote it out, and I gave her 3 chapters, and then it kind of, that was sufficient. That satiated her sort of poltergeist activities in my book, and then they weren't to do with the book. I just kind of, they were separate. I put them aside. So I've got these 3 chapters, utterly unconnected to anything else, that allowed me to progress. They're pretty good chapters actually, but there isn't much of a market for the opening 3 chapters of a book, I find.
Not yet.
You might find that it's part of what you're doing that you need to get into. You might find that it's the beginnings of something completely different. But if you follow it, you're not going to lose anything but time. I guess it depends how much time you have on your hands.
And just know that everything you write, whether it ends up in the end story or not, makes you a better writer. And
absolutely right.
Every time you write, you're getting better. So nothing is ever wasted in that respect. Okay, great. Well, that's the end of our hour. So what's your book about? It's about a character.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will upload it to the community website. So if you found any of it really insightful, you can revisit it again. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
See you later. Thank you.